Greetings, fellow Arrowverse fans. We're looking at Arrow Season 5, now continues on with Spectre of the Gun. The scene opens with a special voiceover notice watchers that today's episode isn't for kids. A short time later, we see a buddy load up a lot of ambush rifles into a sack. Over in the Arrow Cave, Dinah and Diggle fight together while Felicity looks for information with respect to Prometheus' personality. She says that she centered her pursuit around Prometheus' mom and has limited her down to a solitary state. Oliver welcomes Thea back to City Hall. Thea raises Oliver's relationship to Susan Williams. However, Oliver rapidly gets touchy. Thea initially helps Quentin and finds that Renee is his new partner. As Quentin leaves the workplace, he passes a man conveying a similar sack that we saw before, though unloaded up with weapons. The men start shooting Oliver's office, executing a few workers in a somewhat realistic manner. When he shoots the shooter, he is wearing an impenetrable vest. Renee has a flashback to a previous time when he was living with his young spouse and girl. Renee gets a firearm before heading off to a hockey game, afterwards contends with his sweetheart about her conceivably ingesting medications. The shooter departs and Oliver rapidly checks out the circumstance. Thea is protected, yet Chase took a shot to the shoulder and is draining vigorously. Fortunately, Chase is as yet alive, albeit 5 others were dead. Renee says he shot the aggressor in the shoulder and asked Ollie to get his hands on the shooter's essential weapon. Back at the Arrow Cave, Leslie asserts that the shooter isn't in the framework. Notwithstanding, things being what they are, Quentin got a gander at the person's face before he put on a ski cover. Quentin likewise brings up that Renee shouldn't convey a gun, as it's illicit for an indicted criminal to have one. It's illicit for an indicted criminal to have one. In a subsequent flashback, Renee shows his better half the medications he found when his girl appears. Renee gives his better half a final proposal. Either no more medications, or she's gone. Oliver illuminates Thea that 2 additional casualties died. Oliver says that the shooter is going to strike once more. He then plays Renton Chase, who is determined to return to work regardless of his physical issue. Oliver persuades it to remain, yet Chase instructs him to investigate the Bertinelli family, as 90% of their hits have included attack rifles. Chris and Renee contend over firearm control, while Felicity attempts to follow the rifle. In the meantime, Oliver finds one of the Bertinelli mobsters, who says he didn't have anything to do with the shooting. Vigilante Pearson firearms the mobster down before escaping. Felicity contacts Oliver and says that the real shooter is a multi-year-old frameworks investigator with a perfect record. Felicity distinguishes the shooter as the man who lost his family in a shopping center shooting. The shooter recently bolstered a Star City firearm vault. However, it tumbled off the radar after the library was closed somewhere on the past investigation. Oliver says he'll say something to the press and advises the remainder of the group to find the shooter. In another flashback, Renee's little girl gets back home to indications of a battle. Renee advises the little girl to prepare for bed while he scans for a significant other. Oliver offers an official expression and names the shooter to the press. He takes for inquiries. It gets got up to speed when the press gains some information about his assessments on firearm control. Oliver says his perspective on weapon control are confused, and after speedily closes the question and answer session. Back in his office, Oliver fires, thrashing himself for continually going to viciousness as an answer. At that point, he doesn't have a clue how to deal with the circumstances as City Hall leader. Oliver chooses to assemble each government official associated with closing down the weapon vault to begin making sense of an answer. The following day, Oliver talks with the councilwoman who killed the firearm vault. They contend over the legitimateness of weapon control. However, Oliver says she won't leave until they can make sense of some sensible rules for a firearm library. Dougal and Dinah hit the road searching for the shooter. In spite of the fact that their pursuit turns out void, Dougal discovers that Dinah can't discover a condo since they do personal investigations, and she has a hang-up doing what ordinary individuals do. Back at the Arrow Cave, Curtis jumps on a cleanser box by the absence of talk in our nation. It's partially hindered when Felicity finds a Current group the shooter used to be a piece of. Curtis and Renee drop by the Current group and discovers where the shooter is remaining. Curtis discovers that Renee's better half was executed in light of the fact that he didn't have a weapon accessible. In a flashback, we discover that Renee's significant other was murdered when her seller appeared to gather money. Renee attempted to steadily go for his firearm, which was in a safe. He also appeared and made Renee's significant other retaliate. Renee shot the vendor. However, the seller got off a wanderer shot that executed his significant other. Renee and Curtis track down the shooter's den and find floor plans to his next objective, the nearby emergency clinic. Oliver gathers the group and leaves his as yet continuous meeting with the councilwoman over weapon control. At the medical clinic, Oliver stands up to the shooter out of outfit. Oliver says he realizes the shooter is attempting to compel weapon control in the city. He calls attention to that the man who fired his family acquired his weapon illicitly, implying that there was nothing the city could do to ensure them. Oliver brings up that the individuals he shot were blameless as well, which makes the shooter point his weapon at himself. Oliver talks the person down and persuades him to remain down. The following morning, Oliver presents Councilwoman with a weapon control statute they composed with Renee. The Councilwoman consents to back Oliver to some extent, since it would look awful to conflict with Oliver after the shootings. And then the last flashback, we discover that Renee lost this little girl to social administrations because of her being in a dangerous domain. At his breaking point, Renee sees news report about Green Arrow halting Damien Dark, which rouses him to turn out to be Wild Dog. Kurt apologizes to Renee and offers to assist him with getting his little girl back. Dennis says she got the rent to her loft and says she found a new line of work at the Star City Police Department. The scene closes with Oliver holding a vigil for the individuals who passed on at City Hall. He declares under the Weapon Control Act that offsets firearm proprietorship rights with open well-being and says they simply should be fearless enough to sanction it. So let's take a look at some trivia surrounding this episode. This is the lowest rated episode of Season 5 with a rating of 7.3 on IMDb. The original theme music doesn't play when the title card is shown at the beginning. The chief report that Renee watches regarding Damon Dark's death is the same from the DC's Legends of Tomorrow episode with the Legion of Doom. Lydia states that she's been looking for Prometheus' mother for 3 months. So she started her search in Who Are You in December 2016. That plays this episode around March 2017. The episode title is borrowed from the Star Trek The Original Series 1968 episode Spectre of the Gun. This episode's plot is similar to the subplot of the Supergirl episode Not Kansas, in which both cases the gun issue is brought to light and dealt with. And now finally, let's take a look at a goof. The episode originally calls the rifle used an AR-15. An AR-15 is not fully automatic. They're also not military-grade hardware. So I think this episode is pretty good, and yeah, I do like the fact that it does bring up the whole issue of gun control and stuff, which is pretty important, especially in our nation right now, so yeah. So overall, I give Spectre of the Gun 5 arrowheads out of 5. My name is Tony Benz. Wait till the next episode, The Sin Eater. So until then, in the words of Oliver Queen, you have failed this city.